So, Kurt, thank you so much for taking the time for being a part of our community and practice channel here on YouTube. And on behalf of SETI, we want to thank you so much for your leadership today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be having this conversation, to be joining this community.
Awesome. So, as always, we begin by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, if you can please do us the honors by introducing yourself to our listeners and viewers and tell us about your amazing work.
Great. Okay, so my name is Curt Lyon. I'm the executive director of Transform Finance. We're a nonprofit organization based in the US and that does research, advisory, and advocacy work in the impact investment space to build a more equitable distribution of wealth and power across the entire economy. Transform Finance has been around for over a decade now. We were founded in 2013. Really in response to the impact investing movement, which, at that time had kind of just labeled itself, and a lot of the practices that we see today started to emerge in that early form. And as transformer finance evolved and emerged out of conversations with community leaders, we saw both an opportunity for a lot more impact with all this new resource and capital coming in, but also potential risks of thinking about how that capital might not actually be acting in alignment with the existing work of movements, community organizers, social justice movements in particular, and the needs of communities. So we thought, what would it look like to have capital that was really informed and aligned with a broader social change strategy? And how do we make that happen? So we started to work with both investors and community leaders, focusing on really a lot of innovations and ideas from both sides that were being tinkered with in the 2010s. Things like community-owned funds, things like thinking of a cross-portfolio racial justice analysis. And a lot of this work has fortunately become more systematized and implemented across the entire impact space and sometimes even beyond into the traditional finance space. But throughout all of that work, we're really thinking of these high level questions of, how do you think about wealth and power as an investor? How do you make sure that shows up in your investment terms, and how you engage communities, and how you evaluate risk and return across all stakeholders? And we continue to do that, and I'm happy to get into some of our current projects if that would be of interest.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we appreciate all the work that you do. So tell us, like, what inspires you about the work that you do, actually?
So it's definitely in the conversations that we have with stakeholders across all of our different audiences, whether that's foundations, different types of asset allocators, fund managers, or community leaders like researchers, community organizers, other kinds of field building organizations, and seeing this conversation progress and evolve over time. For example, recently, and I won't name names, but there's a foundation here in the US that we've been having conversations with for years and trying to, really get them to consider investments in grant making around the ownership economy, which is a big area that we are working in right now. And it's been really, really affirming to see over the years these conversations start from just this kernel of one individual saying, "Hey, I may be interested in this. I'm going to attend some webinars and read your stuff," and then slowly start to convert the team and the broader foundation into being a real backer for this movement, considering not just grant making for investments. Seeing that organizational growth is what inspires me, because it reminds me that, while we talk about ideas a lot, it's actually about person to person organizing and informing and spreading through networks. I really liken a lot of our work to community organizing, even though our primary work is in the investment space.
Exactly, exactly. So let me ask you this. What challenges or barriers have you faced in your work, and how have you overcome them, or at least in the process of overcoming?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the elephant in the room is something that I'm happy to just name, which is appetite for risk and return and how that's being assessed. I really think a lot of the ideas that we are pushing for, whether that's in employee ownership, community-owned real estate work, community development, investment that it has community engagement. There's always a moment with more conventional impact investors where it's like, if this just had some level of subsidy, or if I could just come in at a senior level instead of a mezz level to, reduce my risk, I would love to do this deal, but my institutional constraints, have like numeric boundaries drawn. And because this shows up everywhere, I think it's so fundamental and it's almost so obvious that I don't think we often actually interrogate what's factoring into that. Sometimes I am again when it comes to inspiration, really drawn to some of the work that community leaders have done to reevaluate credit assessment and kind of going beyond the 5 C's of lending, especially for consumer lending. There are some really amazing projects led by Indigenous leaders here in the U.S. I would shout out Vanessa Roanhorse, Native Women Lead, and Jamie Gloche, who's now at Common Future, as really being leading experts on figuring out, how do you lend without, considering credit scores and, kind of like those more institutional practices that we know create barriers to opportunities for folks who typically are not included in the financial system. That's just one example that I think we can zoom out into really all corners of finance, whether that's LPs looking to invest in funds, deals that are helping businesses convert to employee ownership, which is an area we're working on super impactful. We really need to figure out how to get over this hump. And I think it really boils down to figuring out who can help us get there and what's the pathway to a broader narrative shift and comfortability uh, with that growth zone of playing around with risk and return in different ways.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, is there anything you wanted to amplify at this time? Anything new you wanted to announce?
So transfer finance, as I've mentioned, has a big focus on the ownership economy, which we are really interested in models that are not just creating ownership and wealth building opportunities, but also opportunities for communities and workers to govern the big economic entities in their lives, whether that's their workplace, their home, buildings in their communities like shopping malls or community centers. Um, we are digging into the kind of nitty gritty of what it takes to build out a financing ecosystem for these areas in the economy. And of course, we're not alone. This is a long-standing but rapidly growing in terms of momentum movement here in the United States and globally. Actually, last week we just did a webinar that featured folks working on alternative ownership enterprise models across the world, which is really fun. So in terms of our priorities, what we're interested in is getting these ownership spaces to the next level. Right now, there's a lot of reliance on philanthropic support, which is totally normal for any kind of cutting edge impact space. And the question is, how do we get uh, different players into the room, prove out the viability of these models so that they're, again, going back to risk and return, they're assessed in a way that's more accurate to the reality, which is that these kinds of projects are often seen as much more risky than they actually are because they don't have that track record. So getting to that next level, it requires building that track record, bringing in new actors and new types of capital, and really trying to document and get this in front of the right set of supporters. So we're working on all of those fronts together with some of the peers in this ownership space. And we really hope that over the next 3 to 5 years, we can help investors across the spectrum, grant makers, and community leaders figure out the best way to participate in this movement.
Very good. Well, this has been very, very, enlightening of what's going on with our neighbors, and this is the ongoing process to lead to a better world, better communities, and we really appreciate all that you do. So, what does success look like to you? If I was to summarize, what does success look like to you?
You're asking the impact measurement question, every grant writer's favorite one. No, but I actually think very simply about success, which is I think about people not having as many worries in their life, as many stressors, as many things that distract them from the things that are important from them. I really think the economy we currently have traps people on purpose, and especially people of color, indigenous communities here in the US. Immigrants are facing this right now, as they have at many points in our history. It traps them in this cycle of not really having autonomy and control, and being reliant on these systems of capital that really are not acting in their best interests. So the type of finance that we're hoping to support and kind of help get to that next level, so that it can continue to get rung by rung higher up on the ladder in terms of viability in the economy, is one where people don't have those worries. They have access to wealth building opportunities and assets that they can fall back on. They are more connected with their communities, and the resources in their communities are aligned with those networks, so that they're acting in a kind of coordinated manner, and it's not up to everyone to provide for themselves. There are actually institutions and products out there that can support folks when they, are running late on their rent payment. When they do have another kid and need more safety in their personal finances. It really boils down to the person and community level. And if you talk to anyone who is experiencing any kind of hardship and you ask enough questions, you see capital behind a lot of these things, and how investors are actually, playing a critical role, and they might not even know it. Our stance is not at all to vilify or call out any investor. It's really just to point out that all investment has impact on these really important things, these fundamental, day-to-day factors in people's lives. So it's not to remove capital, it's just to help capital become an actual tool for ways that transform the material, well-being for everybody, but especially those who capital currently is not serving.
Exactly. Well, we thank you so much for what you do. And again, we have our next generations that we have to look at that are coming in. And, we just lay the foundation and do our best, but at least we're making that step. So we want to thank you so much. So if you can give us your closing thoughts and calls to action that as we close.
Yeah, no, thank you. This has been such a fun conversation, and I always love taking a step back from the weeds. In terms of a final call to action, as I said in my last answer, this does boil down to individual action and person-to-person network building, and so each individual has a role. And when we're talking about building the kind of finance that Transform Finance is working on, we often need folks to ask themselves, am I in a position to be a first mover to build this world, to catalyze additional investment? And so I think just repeatedly asking yourself, when you come across a new investment opportunity, or if you're a grant maker or an individual wealth holder, if you are thinking about making charitable donations, or impact investments, it's asking yourself, how can I be a first mover to build something new? And how do I challenge myself to think differently about what kind of risk tolerance I'm willing to use as my operating strategy? So, individuals, families and family offices, family foundations, those with strong decision-making power within their investment institutions, the CIOs, the CEOs, the presidents. Think about your hand being on that lever to actually do something that might seem risky, but can actually catalyze a much broader change that might actually get to where we want to go from an impact investing standpoint faster than kind of taking the easier route of investing in more proven opportunities.
Fire truck passing. So expensive. I can go before I open up the mute. But Curt, thank you so much for all that you do. Again, on behalf of SETSI, we appreciate your leadership. We wish you much success and continue your journey. And I know, we'll definitely be collaborating again sooner than later. So we will close the way that we began by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So definitely we'll be in touch. And thanks again, Curt, for all you do.
Thank you, and feel free to reach out anytime.
Absolutely. All right. Take care.
Yeah.